the intro.
Yeah, no, Eddie and I often discuss when we look down press row, who really knows what they're talking about? And we always go, no doubt about it, it's Jessie. And not to get too far afield here, there's a lot of guys in the media that, this was kind of thrown in their laps. They never really followed hockey. The three of us not only have followed hockey all our lives, the three of us have played it at different levels. So I think we have a little bit of a leg up. Would you agree that there may be the coverage is not as strong as it could be, let's say, in a city like Toronto or Montreal or Pittsburgh?
I'm not one that thinks you have to play a sport to cover it, especially because you hear so many athletes that go to broadcasting and they're terrible. I think playing sport, being good at physically playing something is not necessarily the same thing as being able to verbalize it and break it down in words and explain why something's happening or why it's not. But I do, at the same time though, I do think that my experience of being a terrible goalie, and like I wasn't good. Like I didn't play at a high level. I play men's league now, and it's fun, and I love it. I do think that it can help me in that I know what it's like to be screened on a play. I know what it's like to have to stop a 2-on-1, like even though it's at a much lower level. So I do think that there are advantages to people who have played the sport, but at the same time, I think there are plenty of people out there that have never played hockey that are better at breaking it down than former NHL players.
Fair enough.
But Jessie, I think we'll get to the specifics of it. Robin Leonard in a press conference specifically said he felt like he wasn't getting a fair shake from the media, and I'm not going to put you on the spot, and we're not going to talk about the lateral movement thing, even though it was funny and you took it all in great spirits. But do you think that maybe the media here doesn't know the nuances of goaltending and doesn't recognize, because they've seen Marc-Andre Fleury be so athletic, when they see somebody who's basically 100 degrees opposite of them as a goaltender, where they just don't understand the difference in styles, and that they are just as effective for who's playing them?
Maybe. I mean, I think they're two very different goalies. Like, it's hard to find two goalies who are more opposites than these two in style. And I think they give you different things. And like Robin, obviously, Robin has listened to my comments about him clearly. And he listened to when I compared the two. And my comparison of the two has not changed after watching this playoffs. And I think Robin Leonard is a more consistent goalie who is going to – you don't have to worry about him back there. You're never going to lose a game because of Robin Leonard. And they didn't lose any games in these playoffs because of Robin Leonard. But at the same time, he's also not the type of goalie who can steal you games. And he can here and there. He's just not as adept at that as someone like Marc-Andre Fleury, who's going to be a Hall of Famer. And he took exception to me saying that. I still agree. I still feel the same way that Robin Leonard is a very good goalie in this league. He's one of the top 10 goalies in the entire NHL and deserves a long-term contract and deserves to be paid like that. But at the same time, I think his strengths are different than Marc-Andre Fleury. And I think you saw it with Thatcher Demko, Anton Khudobin. A goalie can single-handedly win you games in the playoffs, and they didn't really get that from Leonard this year. That's not to say he can't do that. I think he may in the future. I think he's going to be here a while, and I think he may win them some games in the future. But in this postseason, I thought he did his job to exactly what he should have done. He stopped all the shots he should have. He stopped a couple he shouldn't have. That Game 7, the one that he was joking about, is one of them. But at the same time, I don't think he's built to stand on his head and carry a team.
Yeah, I mean, basically, they say he's going to give up a first goal, he's going to give up a second goal, and very unlikely he's going to give up a third. So if you can score 3 goals in front of him, you're going to win the overwhelming majority of the games. I think that's basically sort of how they look at it. And the statistics bear it out over the last 4 or 5 years. And that's been with some subpar clubs and with a pretty good Islanders club as well.
And he's done it in all different systems. He's done it in the Islanders, which play a very defensively structured system that doesn't allow high danger chances from the slot. They keep everything to the outside. They may not create as much offense because they're so careful. It's kind of how Dallas is. And then he played in Chicago, where they don't even know how to spell defense. They allowed more offensive chances than any team in the league, and he still played well there. And then he goes to Vegas, which is yet another different type of system, which is not as defensively structured as the Islanders, but not as up and down as the Blackhawks. They're more of a possession team that likes to have the puck a lot, and you saw that in these playoffs. So he's done it in 3 different systems. He's had a high save percentage in all 3. I think Robin Lehner has proven that he is a legitimate top 10 goalie in this league, regardless of system, regardless of team. I think a lot of people thought after that Vezina year, maybe it was a fluke. Maybe the Islanders just played really well in front of him, and it didn't matter what goalie was back there. They were going to put up those stats. And I think he's proven since then that that's not the case.
Jesse, would you say, based upon what you just said, would you say no matter who was in net during this Dallas series, whether it was Fleury or Lerner, that the results would have been the same?
That's impossible. I honestly don't know. I do think there's something to say about having Marc-Andre Fleury back there, because I'm not a big intangible guy. Like, I'm more lean towards the analytics and the numbers, but I do think there is some room for in sports for emotion and for just the off ice and the emotional aspect. And I think Marc-Andre Fleury loosens a team. And I think this team got tight. They were squeezing their sticks tight. You heard him talking about it after those 2 games against Thatcher Demko, where he played amazing. I think this team got tight, and they got tight at the worst possible time in the season. And I don't know if Marc-Andre Fleury in net solves that. Maybe he doesn't. But I think there is a chance that if it was Marc-Andre Fleury back there and he's his jokey self and he's flipping the puck on his stick like it's a spatula and he's sticking his finger in guys' ears, giving them wet willies I think there is an aspect that isn't necessarily goaltending, stopping the puck related, that Marc-Andre Fleury may have been able to help. We'll never know. And that's how sports are. We could argue all day long. I will say this, though. As far as just stopping the puck from going in the net, Robin Lehner did his job and then some.
Oh, no question about that.
But there any of the blame for the loss.
No question about that. But here's my next question to you. Did DeBoer make a mistake?
Did he push the wrong
goaltenders?
Did he push the wrong buttons? Because in his interview with Kelly McCrimmon and George McVie to get the job, when they said, why should we hire you? The quote is, I shouldn't say it's a quote, it's a paraphrase, is, I pushed the right buttons in the playoffs.
Right.
Did he not push the right buttons this time?
I mean, so before the playoffs started, I made it very clear my opinion was they should start Marc-Andre Fleury. And my opinion for that was it creates no drama. If you start Marc-Andre Fleury, he's obviously fine with it. Lehner's obviously fine with it, because Lehner came here as he just got here a few months ago. He would have no issues with starting as the backup. And then you have Robin Lehner, this consistent rock in net, that if Marc-Andre Fleury falters, you can go to him and you know he's going to get you consistency. So to me, the ideal way to play this postseason was, let's see, because Marc-Andre Fleury wasn't at his best this year. There's no secret. Like his stats weren't great this year. He wasn't at his best, but he did show signs there at the end that maybe he was getting there. So to me, the ideal way to play this postseason out was, let's see if we can get Marc-Andre Fleury at his best. Because if Marc-Andre Fleury's at his best, he's better than Robin Lehner. And I don't even think it's close. I think Marc-Andre Fleury on his A game will carry you to a cup final, even if you aren't the best team. We saw it 2 years ago. I think you should have at least given him the chance to see if that's what they could get out of him. And then if you don't get it, the leash is short. This isn't like Malcolm Subban as the backup where you're going to ride Fleury no matter how he plays. If he doesn't play well, you go to Robin Lehner, and if he plays well, that's his job. I thought that's how it should have went. I thought they should have given Fleury the chance to prove he can be at that elite level where he can carry a team to a cup, because I thought that was their best chance to win a Stanley Cup, was that scenario. Now, I can't say DeBoer played it incorrectly, because he put Robin Lehner in there and he played awesome. And then he put Fleury in there in a few situations that I thought were tough situations for a goalie to play, as far as just the days off, where it was in the series. He put Fleury in some spots that I thought maybe were going to be tough, and Fleury played outstanding. So I have a hard time criticizing DeBoer for his decisions in net when the goalies played as well as they did, because they got good goaltending in every game of this postseason. There wasn't one game in this postseason where you could point to it and say, man, if the goalie was better, they win that game. So while he didn't do it the way I would have, I'm not going to hammer the guy for doing it the way he did.
Okay,
Yeah, I mean, they only scored 6 goals. I mean, with a goaltender in net, they only scored 6 goals in 5 games.
Right. It's not good.
You know, you can have Jesus Christ in net and you're not going to win.
Right.
I mean, I hate to use that as an analogy, but so here's my question, Jesse. Who is the better team? Was it Dallas or Vegas?
I think Vegas is better, but I think Dallas did a better job of making the Golden Knights play their game. And the Golden Knights, even playing Dallas's game, the Golden Knights still control the games. Like
outplayed them.
Right. Like even I don't like the word outplay, and Riley Smith loved using it because the game was going the way Dallas wanted it to. And there isn't transition. There isn't racing back and forth up and down the ice. It was, we play in this zone, then we bring it down to the other end and we play in that zone. And the Golden Knights proved they aren't good at scoring in those situations. They're much better at scoring in transition, whereas Dallas is good at scoring in those situations. They have the big, strong forwards that can outmuscle you in front of the net, get to those rebounds. You saw the 2 goals they scored in the third period to tie that game in Game 5 were not pretty goals in transition. We just outmuscled you in front of the net, took the puck and put it into the net. And I think, so while I do think the Golden Knights are the better team, they were outplayed in this series. And the reason I say that is because there are 2 drastically different styles of hockey that these teams like to play, and Dallas forced the Golden Knights to play their style. And in that style of hockey, the Stars are better. So they outplayed the Golden Knights, despite, in my opinion, being a less talented team.
Okay, fair enough. So here's one other question I have for you. And not that I think you would know, because based upon what's going on, none of us have really inside contact with the team after this pandemic. Is the locker room divided between the Fleury, Robin, Leonard situation?
Yeah, I mean, that's something that I've wondered during these playoffs, and it's something that's tough to gauge when we're sitting here at home doing the Zoom press conferences instead of in the room like we normally are. I think I'm confident saying I don't think the room was divided. I do think if you took a poll, an anonymous poll, and asked the players, who do you want in net, Fleury or Leonard, it would be split. I guarantee that. I'm very confident. They're not all going to vote for one guy or the other. But at the same time, I don't think the guys who wanted Fleury in net played more, like not as well because Leonard, or the guys who wanted Leonard in net didn't play poorly when they went to Fleury. So I don't think the room was divided, but I do think that there are differing opinions. But we focus on the goalies because it's the most important position and it's the only one of them can play. But at the same time, there are other roster moves that the players don't all agree with either. When they move Max Pacioretty down to the third line, I'm sure there are players that are thinking, what the hell is Max Pacioretty doing on the third line? Right. And when Alex Tuch and Nick Waugh get split up, I'm sure I was thinking, why the hell are they splitting them up? I'm sure there were other players thinking, why are they splitting up? So you're never going to have full consensus in the room on every decision you make. And obviously it's magnified with this goalie situation, but it's not that big of a deal in my opinion.
And today at the press conference, Kelly McCrimmon basically, he made a point to say that he gives the lineup or the roster to the coach and the coach makes a decision. Do you think either McCrimmon, McPhee, and DeBoer that the goaltending selection or choice, think that was by committee, or do you think it was solely in the lap of DeBoer?
I think it was by committee because they traded for Robin Leonard. So DeBoer wouldn't have had Robin Leonard if they didn't trade for him, and they traded for him for a reason. So
no, I know that. What I'm talking about is as far as who he put in the nets during these games. And
night by night, Jesse.
Yeah, night by night.
I think those decisions are made by DeBoer, but I think Kelly McCrimmon and George McPhee, when they traded for Robin Leonard, they knew this was going to happen. Like he said today that they didn't expect this to happen, but I think when they traded for Robin Leonard, it was to improve the starting goaltender. I don't think it was to improve the backup the way they said. And I think their communication to us, and they can lie to me. Like I'm a reporter, who cares? Like they can tell me Marc-Andre Fleury is the starter. I have no problem with that, even if they know he's not going to be the starter. But where I had the issue was, tell Marc-Andre Fleury. He should have been told. And like that's where you get the tweet from Alan Walsh and the stabbing in the back and all that. Fleury's been through this before. He got benched in Pittsburgh for Matt Murray, and there was no sort of drama, and he handled the whole thing perfectly. The difference to me this time was he was told one thing and they did another thing. And you asked, I know this was a question about picking the starting goalie, but I think from the moment they made that trade, I think, even if they hadn't told anyone, I think in their minds, they were going to, Robin Leonard was the guy. I think DeBoer prefers that style of goalie. I think he feels more comfortable with that style of goalie back there. He's an analytics guy, and he believes in the numbers, and you heard him all series. If we keep doing this, we're going to win. DeBoer believes if we keep doing this, we're going to win. And Robin Leonard, his goalie style matches that philosophy because
consistent. Yeah, because it's consistent.
He believes if I have the better goalie, even if he doesn't come up with the spectacular saves like Marc-Andre Fleury does, if I have him in net every game, I'm going to win more than I'm going to lose. And I think that while it was DeBoer who was I don't think George McPhee or Kelly McCrimmon were telling Pete DeBoer. Actually, I know for a fact George McPhee and Kelly McCrimmon were not telling Peter DeBoer who to start. He made that decision. But I think as a trio, I think they came to the conclusion that they needed to upgrade the goalie position at the deadline.
So do you think that they lied to us when they said that they conferred with Fleury before they made the move for Leonard?
Sorry, guys. I'm going to punt on that one. I've heard some things, but I'm going to punt on that question. I'm not going to discuss that.
Listen, this isn't a court.
Sorry for the tough question, Jesse, but
that's great. That's great.
I'll go out on a limb and say we were lied to. I don't think they went because Fleury's a proud guy, and based upon what happened to him in Pittsburgh, and he knows that the quality of goaltending that Leonard can bring to the team, that would kind of put his position of starting in a very strange position. So I'm not sure if they really actually said, hey, Mark, we're thinking about bringing this guy in. Are you okay with that? I don't see that happening. But we were told that, though.
Right. And to me, this is the biggest issue with this whole situation. They told Marc-Andre Fleury when they traded for Robin Leonard. I'm not going to get into if they told him before or after, but they told Marc-Andre Fleury, you're the guy. We're bringing him in case something happens to you. And they all the way up and during the pause, this is after they've played them both, after the pause, going up to Edmonton, Marc-Andre Fleury was under the belief that you are 100% the starting goalie for this team. It's not a timeshare. He's not the guy. You are the guy. And then he gets up to Edmonton and he's not the guy. And not only is he not the guy, it's not a rotation. It's Leonard's net. Yeah. So that to me is what sparked all of this drama. I have no problem with the Golden Knights trading for Robin Leonard. I have no problem with the Golden Knights playing Robin Leonard if they think he's the better goalie. This is pro sports. We can't be worried about people's feelings. But you can manage your players in a different way by telling them what's going on, and it could have went differently if they had spoken to Marc-Andre Fleury differently than they did and not prolonged this decision, because it's clear that Leonard's the guy, and eventually DeBoer basically admitted he's the guy. If they had not prolonged that until the very last second, things would have gone differently, I think.
Okay, we were gonna talk about awards and some best ofs and stuff like that, but we don't have you for the full hour today. We're gonna try and get through it. Here's a simple question: have we seen the very last of Marc-Andre Fleury in a Vegas Golden Knights uniform?
Most likely, yeah. Nothing's finalized yet, and I've heard a lot of stuff, from everything I've heard, the organization is leaning towards signing Robin Leonard to a long-term deal. And if you do that, you can't have them both. They're not going to trade a top six forward and kill their roster just to have $12 million in goalies. I don't see that happening. So if they're going to sign Robin Leonard to a deal, which it appears they are, the logical next move is to move on from Marc-Andre Fleury. So yeah, if I was a betting man, which I'm not, but if I was, I would bet that we have seen the last game of Marc-Andre Fleury in a Golden Knights uniform.
Is Fleury movable with a $7 million price tag?
You're probably going to have to retain salary. I think moving a 35-year-old goalie that makes $7 million a year is going to be difficult in normal circumstances. And now you add on to that the environment. Yeah, the flat cap, staying at 81.5, and the fact that there's a lot of major concerns in the league about revenue and when that cap will go up again. So teams aren't just worried about this season's cap because that Fleury contract has 2 more years. They're worried about the next season. And there's a threat that it could be 81.5 again next season. And even a team that may be willing to take on the full $7 million this year, they're not going to be willing to do that for 2 years. So you can't retain salary on one season and not the other. It has to be for the rest of the contract. So I do see the Golden Knights, the max that they can retain is $3.5 million. I would expect they have to retain somewhere between $2 and $3.5 million on that contract. And if you end up signing Robin Lehner to a $5 million a year deal, which is what has been out there, and then you retain $2 million on Fleury, you're basically getting Robin Lehner for the $7 million that you were paying Fleury. So I think in the end, you're okay with that if that's what you have to do.
Well,
And do you think Dansk is a good backup for Robin?
I don't think he's an ideal NHL backup, and I don't think he's a backup. I've been of the opinion that you need to play your backup goalie a lot in the regular season. I'm sure you guys have heard me screaming that with Malcolm Subban for 3 years, that they overplayed Fleury. They didn't play Subban enough, and you see it around the league. The league as a whole is shifting towards playing goalies in a rotation, even if it's 65-40 or 35 rather than, it's not going to be 80-20. And I think if you have a backup like Oscar Dansk, it's probably going to end up being more towards 80-20, but they may not have a choice. I mean, he's super cheap, and for his value, for what they're paying him, Oscar Dansk is a outstanding value. I think he's a good goalie. He's good enough to be a backup goalie, and he's not making any money. So if they do opt to go that direction, I think that's fine. But at the same time, if you want to truly have a 1A, 1B rotation the way that I think they should and the way most teams are going, that's not Oscar Dansk. You would definitely
and what happens here, Jesse, is that if in fact next season is going to be condensed in order to try to play a full season, you have no choice but to play your backup basically every other game, because the season is just going to be condensed, because they're talking about possibly not starting till January and
Right.
still completing an 82-game season. There's going to be multiple, I think the Knights might have had 6 back-to-back games last season. They might have 26 back-to-back games.
Right. Yeah, no, you're right. That's a good point. It's going to make the backup goalie even more important. And then the other scenario that I've kind of thrown out there, and I've written about it a few times, is I do think they may just ride with Oscar Dansk until the trade deadline, knowing that, okay, he's cheap, we're saving on the cap, he's going to be decent enough to get us through. And then at the deadline, there are going to be a ton of goalies that may not be moved, but they're going to be available, and they're going to be these teams aren't going to be forced to move them, but if they get offers, they will listen to them. And the reason is the Seattle expansion draft is coming up, and once the trade deadline next season passes, whenever that, I want to say February, but it's not going to be February.
No way.
April, maybe June.
Once we reach that trade deadline, rosters are locked until the expansion draft. If you remember when Vegas did it, teams don't get to make moves in that offseason prior to the expansion draft to avoid teams trying to work their way around the cap, or around the expansion. So when we get to the trade deadline next year, these teams that have 2 goalies that are both going to be exposed in the expansion draft, they're only going to be able to protect one. They're going to be listening to offers from those. So I think the Golden Knights at the deadline may just decide to stick with Oscar Dansk as the backup, and then call around to all these teams, see if they can find a bargain, and maybe they end up upgrading that position then, and take advantage of this being exempt from the Seattle expansion.
And Jesse, I believe the other option for the other 30 teams would be that they take Fleury to protect their goaltender that they would have to expose, and expose Fleury in the expansion draft. So they would take Fleury and this, let's say, his $5 of the $7 million contract, and only have to sit with it a short time, and then expose them in the expansion draft and protect the goaltender that they would normally have had to not protect in the expansion draft. And then Fleury winds up in Seattle back with Gerard Gallant, possibly.
And the other, now that you bring that up, the other option to acquire another goalie is in that Fleury trade. Like, I could see, say it's Carolina, Edmonton, whoever it is, a good team that needs a goalie. That team could send their current goalie back to Vegas in that deal, and that would kind of open up some cap space, right? Like, if their goalie's making $3 million, you send Fleury $7 million, they send their $3 million back. Now they're only taking on $4 million in additional cap, whereas if they're just taking Fleury on his own, then that's $7 million. So I do think maybe if the Golden Knights opt to trade Fleury, I could see a situation where the backup goalie to Lehner is coming back in that trade.
So are you thinking that could be somebody like Reimer in Carolina?
Yeah. So yeah, I honestly, like, the off season's just beginning. Like, I still have to dig into, I'm going to write a whole piece on the the teams most likely to trade for Fleury. But I could see it being, Reimer in Carolina, or I could see it being Koskinen in Edmonton. I could see it being one of the Colorado, like it could be Francouz in Colorado. I don't know if Vegas would trade Fleury to Colorado. To me, Colorado would be the best fit because they're a good team that needs a goalie with cap space. But that trading Fleury to Colorado, it sure feels like he's going to eliminate them from the playoffs next year.
Yeah, 1,000%.
So I don't know
if they Fleury within you do not want to send Fleury to another Pacific Division team. That would be suicide. And back in New York, the Rangers would never trade with the Devils or the Islanders. Right. They didn't want that. They didn't want to have to look at the guy that they sent them, the one that's eliminating them out of the playoffs or the season.
You don't want to be Chicago with Leonard eliminating them this year.
Well, here's the kink, Jesse. Yesterday, I think at noon was the deadline for Fleury to turn in his 10-team exempt list. Now, I haven't been able to find it. I don't know if you've seen it. I don't know if that's a public thing or it's an internal thing. But depending on which way he played at, I mean, if he wanted to be a bad actor about this, he could put on 10 teams that have all the cap room and the ability to trade for him. And he could force the Golden Knights. Because I'm thinking there might not be a trade partner. You use that 3 and 4 equals 7. If they buy him out, it's only 2.3 for the first couple of years. There's a bad hit, I think, in year 3
and 4.
And right. But for the first couple of years, they actually probably create a positive revenue scenario if it's only 2.3. And if he's eliminated a lot of the potential trade partners in his 10-team exempt list, he could put the Golden Knights in a pretty precarious position. That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah, I mean, he definitely could. I mean, him and his agent, Alan Walsh, if they want to make this difficult on the Golden Knights, it won't be hard for them to. I mean, they could basically make him untradeable.
Right.
And we won't, by the way, just to answer your question, we will never know what the 10-team no trade list is. That is a document that is filed by his agent to the Golden Knights. And it's been, by the way, they didn't just come up with this 10-team list. When he signed the contract back in 2018, he had to come up with a list then, and then it just gets renewed every year.
Every year, right? Every year that it has to be in. Well, I can tell you for sure that the Red Wings are probably on that list, but that gets us down to 9.
It's going to depend on how they want to play it, right? And to be honest, I don't see a reason for them to make him untradeable. Because like I said, they could if they wanted to. They could find the 10 teams they could possibly trade, and they could put him on that list, and it basically makes him untradeable. But at the same time, what good does that do Marc-Andre Fleury? To keep him here in a place he doesn't like. If the team doesn't want him and they're trying to move on from him and they don't want him to be the goalie, I don't see a reason to force him to stay in Vegas. And then, like you said, worst case scenario, they can still buy him out. I don't think the team wants to buy him out because that.
Oh, no, I don't think. I absolutely don't think they want to.
Yeah,
especially
flat cap.
That's the grenade plan. That's it. That's if every other thing falls through. And they've got no other out. That's the emergency trap door.
Jesse, while Eddie's thinking about his next question, I have one that's 4-part question. What is your biggest?
4 parts?
4 parts.
We only got the guy for another 10, 15 minutes.
Okay, it's real quick though. What was your biggest surprise of the season for the Knights? What was your biggest surprise in the playoff bubble? And then what was your biggest disappointment of the season? And what was your biggest disappointment in the playoff bubble?
I'm sorry if you can hear my cat. My cat is yelling at me.
Oh, that's right.
No, Jesse, don't worry about it. I'm surprised my cat hasn't made an appearance. It's perfectly acceptable.
So biggest surprise of the postseason and of the season, I would say Zach Whitecloud.
100%.
Going into this year, they knew that they were going to need a rookie defenseman to step up. They traded Colin Miller in the offseason, and they said it right at the time. Like, we are going to give these guys a chance, and we all kind of thought it was going to be Nick Hague.
Yes, yeah.
And Nick Hague played decently throughout the regular season, but he wasn't what they had hoped yet. And I think he can still be that, but he wasn't there yet. And Zach Whitecloud comes out of nowhere. I mean, he was one of the older of those rookies, and he was undrafted. It's not like he was a highly thought of prospect the way Hague was, for example. So he came in, and to me, what was most surprising was just the trust level that Peter DeBoer had in him. He led the team in penalty kill minutes in the playoffs as a rookie, and that you just don't see that. Even penalty killing is something done by veterans. I mean, even Derek England there towards the end, like that was the only thing keeping him in the lineup was his ability to kill penalties. And you see older guys that are good at that. And the fact that White Cloud was so impressive and so safe for DeBoer to trust him in that situation, to me, that was the biggest surprise. Biggest disappointment of the playoffs, obviously, it's the scoring drying up from the top six. Mark Stone played a great game, but he just couldn't score. And you're paying a guy $9.5 million. I'm paying him to score goals. He couldn't score. Max Pacioretty, second highest paid player on the team, could not score goals. So that's the biggest disappointment. Biggest disappointment for the whole season, I would say, is Cody Glass. I had high hopes for that kid coming into this league, and I don't think it's necessarily his fault because he was hurt for a lot of it and he was played out of position and he was put in spots on lines where it's very difficult to succeed, especially a young kid like him. So I'm not putting it on Cody Glass, and I don't think this is an indictment of what he'll be in the future, but I will say I expected a big season from him. I thought by the time the playoffs roll around, he's going to be a major factor, like similar to like what Alex Tuck is, and he just wasn't, and he got hurt, and to me that's disappointing, and it's something that I'm hoping to see next season. And one of the things I'm looking forward to see next season is how he can take that next step and if he can stay on the ice consistently, because I think he's got the potential to be a really, really good player.
You know, he was put in a couple of bad spots, but he also was put in a good spot when he was put between Stone and Pacioretty, which was he excelled there. And
yeah, you saw how good he looked.
Yeah.
I think that Peyton Krebs is a serious threat to Cody Glass. We sat and watched him when they came back as a full team, and that young man did not look out of place skating with the team. And he, I think, has a higher offensive upside. I think Cody Glass is a great playmaker. We've all watched him work off the wall on the power play. He has great hands and great passing, but I think there's going to be a great battle between 9 and 18 to see who becomes that 2-3 center when Stastny probably ultimately leaves after next year's contract is up.
The only caveat with that, and I think the reason Krebs is kind of at a disadvantage in that like training camp battle, is Krebs has to, in order to make the team, that Peyton Krebs, they have to be 100% certain he is a full-time NHL player right now. And the reason is he's not allowed to play in the AHL. He's too young. He still has another year where his junior team owns his rights. And the agreement between the NHL and Canadian Major Junior Hockey says that the only way a player can skip out on that final year that he belongs to that junior team is if he's playing in the NHL and only the NHL. So whereas Cody Glass, if he's not good enough and you play him and he's not fitting in and he's not good enough, you just send him to Henderson Silver Knights. And he doesn't even have to get on a plane. He's just, tomorrow you go to AHL practice instead of NHL.
You've been jettisoned to Henderson.
Right. Whereas Peyton Krebs, it's all or nothing. It's either you are an NHL player and you're going to be on our 23-man roster all season long, or you send him back to junior hockey for another year of development, which is what they did with Glass, and it's what they've done with pretty much every prospect that they've had. So to me, it's going to be hard for Peyton Krebs in that training camp and preseason to make that jump just because of how skittish this team is on committing to prospects that early.
Son, get on the bus. You're going to Henderson.
So, Jesse, does Derek England?
Hold on, Joe. I got that whole line.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, we're gonna jump. We're gonna fast forward 2 weeks till next season, Jesse, because that's pretty much when it's gonna happen. The draft is coming up, then free agency, and everybody talked about in the press conference that they want to keep all their core together and they want to keep as many players as they can together. Okay, yes or no? Is Nick Cousins a Golden Knight next year?
Yes.
Is Chandler Stevenson a Golden Knight next year?
Yes.
Is Tomas Nosek a Golden Knight next year?
That's, to me, the hardest one. I will say yes, but that one is very, very iffy.
Is John Merrill a Golden Knight next year?
Another one that's not a slam dunk, yes or no, but I will guess no on that one.
Okay. And then we'll have to close with is Derek England going to go out gracefully and be the face of the franchise and be forever remembered for his speech in October? Or is he going to insist that he still has more legs and wear another NHL jersey?
Yeah, I think Derek England's done. I definitely don't think he plays anywhere else. It's either here or nowhere else, or retire, and I think it's probably going to be retire.
Joe, what do you think? Cousins?
Cousins stays.
Stevenson?
I think Stevenson stays.
Noshik?
Yes, I think Nosek is a perfect fit I think he gets a nil at a cheap price, and based upon the flat cap, I think they can afford Nosek.
Merrill?
I think White Cloud's emergence makes Merrill expendable, and I actually think that White Cloud will not be in the third pairing of the defensive core going forward next year. I think he actually moves up. That's how much this kid impressed me this year, and how much DeBoer had confidence in him. And it's just a shame that the penalty was hung on him. It was a horrible way. It was horrible to lose. It's horrible to lose on as DeBoer said, a shitty penalty. But it was really shitty that it happened to White Cloud, because the kid, in my opinion, was the star of Edmonton for the Vegas Golden Knights.
And to see that, and to
see his emotion in the penalty box, he was in tears in the penalty box. And I just hope that he can recover from that. And I like the fact that both Ryan Reeves and Alex Stuck was, at least from what I saw, with the two nights that kind of went to him and basically said to him, "Hey, don't worry about it." I'm sure that went down player to player when they got inside, but that just hurt to see that happen, because he was just knocking them dead.
Well, I'm gonna go off the board. I'm gonna say that Cousins does not return.
Okay.
I think that I think he scored in his first game as a Golden Knight, which is the tradition. You get a Golden Knight sweater, you score a goal the first game. But I don't think he did enough to. His qualifying offer is going to be what, $2 million ish, something like that, 1.5, 2 million. I don't think he stays. Stevenson will turn out to be the trade of the early part of the franchise's history. For a 5th round pick, they flat stole him from Washington and he couldn't crack the lineup. I agree 100%. Nosek is a anywhere you want to put him guy, and he's a great penalty killer. He can play third line, he can play wing, he can play center. And I think, like you said, at $1 million, he'll be happy to stay in Vegas and raise his baby. Merrill, I think, is unfortunately gone. I think he's a really good team guy, and I think they liked him a lot in the room. But I just think that he's out. And I hope that England goes out gracefully. Right? It wasn't the best way to not be dressed the rest of the time, but what he did for that franchise at the time that he did it, when he stepped up, don't do anything to sully anything like that, Derek. Just take a management spot or a public relations spot, or start learning the management trade at the AHL, take the bus down to Henderson, do it the right way and be an organization guy till you're old and gray. That's what my hopes are for him. And I'm sad that we're having this podcast now instead of 10 days or 2 weeks from now, when we should be drinking and celebrating a trip down the strip with the Stanley Cup. But it didn't work out that way.
Hey, Jesse, before Jesse leaves, do you think this team, at least of what you can see, what will be going forward, is there still a window for them to win the Stanley Cup?
Definitely. I mean, they've got a great core group of guys all locked up long term, and I think of the core, the only two that are over the age of 30 really is Pacioretty and Stastny. And Pacioretty's just over 30. I think he's still got a couple more years in the tank of being a good player. He had his best season of his career just now. And then you look at all the other guys that are in this core locked up long-term, they're all mid-20s. Mark Stone, William Karlsson, Riley Smith, Jonathan Marchessault. Then you've got that younger group with Shea Theodore, Alex Tuck, Nick Waugh, William Carrier. I think this team is built for the next few years. And windows close quickly in the NHL. I don't think they're going to be good for the next 8 years, but I do think they've still got more than a few more years left to be one of the best teams in the league. And I think they should be one of the better teams in the Pacific Division for a while.
I agree.
All right. We've taken all of the time of yours that we can. Jesse,
Awesome.
thank you so much. You're our first guest on our podcast. and you know, we talked about who we wanted to have, and there wasn't anybody else that we wanted to have for the first go round, because we knew that we could talk real hockey, but we could talk about it on a way that the fans totally get what we're trying to put across. So we really, really appreciate you being our first guest. And welcome back anytime.
I owe Jesse, because I made him walk around the New York Islander parking lot for an hour looking for my car. It was a rent-a-car. I had no idea, and it was freezing out. And Jesse's going, "Is that it? Is that it?" And we walked by the car twice before. It was the only car left in the parking lot.
3 laps around the Coliseum. I think 3 laps around the Coliseum in the freezing cold. Like, I am such a wuss when it comes to the cold. Like, I was dying. But although, yes, that was a great story, but you didn't have to make it up to me, because you made it up to me right after that with like the best tour of New York City. I mean, took me over the Brooklyn Bridge. Joe, if we need a New York City tour guide, Joe, I mean, that was like the best part of the trip to New York. So
Well,
I appreciate you back for
well, great.
Right.
Now I'm on the clock. So next year, Jesse, I'm going to take you on a tour of pizza stops in Detroit, because I know Little Caesars is one of the few arenas in the NHL that you haven't seen.
Yeah, but Eddie, Jesse's already had New York pizza. So once
Exactly.
once you eat filet mignon, you can't eat hamburgers anymore.
Yeah, well, he had hamburgers in New York, so when he has Buddy's Pizza in Detroit,
We'll see. We'll see.
All right,
Jesse, thank you again, buddy. Really appreciate it.
Awesome. Thanks for having me on,
Have a
guys. I
safe off
appreciate it.
season.
Hey, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, folks. We have to beg
Take
for
down
that
there,
at
hit
the
subscribe.
end.
Yeah.
And we'll be back soon. All right, we're done. Joe, that's it. We're out of here.
I think
Jesse
that was
bailed.
well. That was good. Went well, and we want to thank Jesse. That's perfect.